are in our series based on the book by Valerie Kaur entitled See No Stranger. It is a memoir and manifesto of revolutionary love. And as I've been saying these last few weeks, is that this work that we're doing is not for the faint of heart, especially in light of what is going on in our world right now and in our country right now. And this book is a memoir of Kaur's personal journey as a Sikh woman, Sikh being the religious tradition, S-I-K-H. Some people say Sikh. Now, Valerie Kaur was born in California, and this book came out of her experience and her chronicling the persecution and hate crimes against all those that were deemed other after 9/11, after our country's response to 9/11. And she frames this manifesto, this book about revolutionary love, in terms of practical spiritual terms, what we can do to be more connected to one another, even those that aren't like us, don't look like us, don't act like us, don't believe what we believe. And it's a way, this revolutionary love is a way for healing and transformation in our world. And it's done, she says, best in community. So we began with wonder, talking about being willing to wonder about what she calls our opponents. Never does she say enemies. She calls each other opponents. So we began with wonder, and then we moved to grieving with and fighting for all people, actively seeking justice for all people. And then a couple of weeks ago, we talked about releasing our rage in safe places, that resolution and healing cannot occur until we become aware of our own feelings of anger and rage and deal with them in safe spaces. And then, once we do that, we can become better equipped to listen to one another, to continue to wonder and to listen to our opponents. And this week, our topic, you might have guessed already, is about imagination, what Valerie Kaur calls reimagining. I'll read to you a little bit from the book. She writes, "In my early life as an activist, marching in the streets, bullhorn to lips, I used the language of resistance. Resistance to everything, from war to white supremacy to the destruction of the earth." She says this was necessary for survival in her mind. She says, in the traditional activist playbook, we resist the actions of our opponents with the goal of removing them from power. She goes on, but the longer I spent listening to the stories of marginalized people, tending to their wounds, the more I heard a deeper longing for a future where we're all safe and secure in our bodies, free to pursue our dreams, where our social, political, and economic institutions supported not just our survival, but our flourishing. She says we could resist with all our might and never deliver such a future. We need to do more than resist. We need to reimagine the world. She goes on, the greatest social reformers in history did not only resist oppressors, they held up a vision of what the world ought to be. Muhammad, Jesus, Buddha, Dr. King, Dorothy Day, Nelson Mandela, Gandhi. They called for us not only to unseat bad actors, but to reimagine the institutions of power that ordered the world. So this is what I'm calling us into today, and what Valerie is calling us into is to reimagine our world, even in the face of what's going on right now. Even if you think imagining this new world is a pie in the sky dream. Even if it seems so impossible that we could actually climb out in our country of what has been happening, of the deteriorated discourse in the world, of the violence, of the oppression. We, as spiritual students and spiritual warriors, are called to continue to do this work of reimagining our world. This is one of our core unity principles, the law of mind action. What we consistently think about, what we consistently dream about, we bring into fruition, we bring into manifestation. This is a belief that many of us in unity live by. And I say that many of us because unity, we don't make you believe what we believe in order to be part of this tradition. You get to decide in your own personal theology what you believe and how to order your life. But it's a unity principle that what we consistently focus on is what we bring about in the world. One way or the other, we are always using our imagination. We are using it to imagine wonderful things into existence, or we are using it to imagine the opposite. I invite us to think of imagination as the activity of Holy Spirit moving in and through us. Truth is, imagination is creative. Our imagination starts in our mind as an idea, right? So we have mind, and then we have the idea in our mind, and then we have the expression of that idea. That's the creative process. Mind, idea, expression. So, in light of what we've been experiencing in the world, and as we've gone through this book, what Cora experienced in her world, we can ask ourselves some questions. How do we live into our democracy? How do we build up civil discourse in the world for people who not only just disagree, but disagree so far apart, it seems? And how can we take action for ourselves and for others in the world that are suffering? How do we make a real difference in the world? That's what this is all about. So our responsibility is to reimagine our world. Think about this. What does it look like to reimagine a world that works for all? When I think of the phrase revolutionary love, that brings to me a sense of possibility, so that we can all imagine a world where compassion rules, where compassion is the core value for each of our lives, and for each of our governments to have compassion for each other. What might it look like to work for this in our government? To demand that our representatives work for revolutionary love. It's past time. Cora writes in the book, I start to imagine what might be possible if we poured our resources into, instead of punishing people, into more housing, more health care, more education, more art, and more job creation. And then she says, we might worry about dreaming too big, right? Because it sometimes seems overwhelming. She writes, anytime my friends and I worry we are dreaming too big, we remind one another that every unjust social institution in history seemed permanent until it was imagined otherwise. Mind, idea, expression. She goes on, this is our moment to declare what is obsolete, what can be reformed, and what must be reimagined. To master the world as it is, and work together for what it ought to be. So it feels sometimes like the chasms are too huge to ever be bridged, to ever be joined. And I invite us to remember our collective imagination is powerful. Rather than thinking things will never change, and I can't begin to tell you how many times I've heard that it's never going to change, it's always going to be the same. People in power don't care, and it'll always be like this. If you are thinking that right now, I invite you to change your mind, to to create a new thought, to imagine a future of revolutionary love. Let's imagine together a world order that takes into account all of us. Not just people who look like us, not just people with white skin, or people who have money or power, or those who practice our spiritual tradition, or those who have different cultures. It's revolutionary love for all of us, compassion for all of us. And it begins here, with you. I'll tell you one thing. So I've been without cable for years now. Ma'am, that's not true. For about a year. And right before the inauguration, I decided to buy something, it doesn't matter what it was, that would allow me to get some of the cable news so I could watch the inauguration. And so that was wonderful. I got to watch all of that, be in all of that as it was happening rather than reading about it, which is what I normally do, or finding videos after. You know what that's like. And I thought, well, if it works and I can watch the news occasionally, I'll keep it. But I really wanted it for the inauguration. So what's been happening since the inauguration is every time I turn on the news, or I record some programs that are on later at night, and I go to bed early, and to watch the next day. Without exception, since the inauguration, I have turned on the news, watched it for about 5 minutes, and turned it off. Because there's always something. It's always something that we hear about chaos, or we hear about something going wrong, or the newscasters imagine what could go wrong, and there are all these talking heads coming at it from every angle. And I decided that's not for me. And so I haven't gotten rid of it yet. I just made this decision yesterday, but I am getting rid of it. I don't need to watch that news. And you certainly don't need to watch news 24/7. So part one of reimagination is to get those voices and those opinions out of our heads 24/7. In Scripture, we are taught to be in the world, but not of it. In Romans, we read, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind." So I invite you to renew your mind by turning off the news. And then next, I invite us to let go of any fear. Fear that causes us to cling to our ideas or to our stuff. Because that won't allow us to be free to imagine a world that works for all. And here's something that maybe you haven't thought of yet, and we haven't talked too much. But let us let go of the idea that in our world, in our country, there has to be the haves and the have-nots. There has to be rich people and there has to be poor people. We just need to let that go and reimagine a world where everyone has enough. Where everyone has enough. We don't need the haves and the have-nots. And I invite us to be willing to hear something new, to be willing to unlearn what we think we know. When we do that, we can activate our empathy and compassion. If we think we know that all those people that did that are bad people, they deserve to suffer, I invite us to be willing to let that go and to wonder about those people. And when we do that, we can activate our empathy and our compassion. And then, finally, we are called to take action, which is another basic unity principle, a foundational unity principle, that we can talk about all of this until the cows come home. And we must take action. We must look where we can serve, where we can help, where we can lift somebody up, where our voices are the most needed. We are called to reimagine our world in every moment, even in the midst of seeming chaos. You who are watching this, whenever you are watching or hearing it, you are called to step up and see where you can serve, to create a world that works for all. So I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath. And I have some questions to leave you with today. What do you think reimagining the world involves? Where do you think? What do you think reimagining the world involves? If you could reimagine the world built on the core values of justice, equity, and revolutionary love, what would that look like? What would that world look like? What would your community look like? And finally, what action could you take today to help build that world? Breathing in. Breathing out. And as we move forward this week, I invite you every day to join with me and with each other to reimagine a world of revolutionary love that works for everyone. Namaste.